In 1988, at the height of Michael Jackson's Bad Tour, reports claimed that over 100 fans collapsed in a single night in Vienna. Paramedics rushing through the crowd as Jackson stood frozen in his signature pose. And that was just one concert. But what made so many fans faint just from seeing him? Here we have 10 MJ live performances that shocked the world. The year was 1988, and Michael Jackson's Bad Tour had already turned into a global spectacle. But when he arrived in Vienna, the reaction was unlike anything seen before. Local newspapers reported that more than 130 women fainted during the show. The combination of heat, tight crowds, and Jackson's electrifying presence proved overwhelming. Fans collapsed as soon as he walked on stage, some even before he sang a single note. Ambulances lined up outside, medics rushed through the aisles, and still the music thundered on. For many, this moment cemented Jackson's concerts as not just performances, but full-blown cultural eruptions, where the human body simply couldn't contain the emotion. When Michael Jackson arrived in Bucharest for the Dangerous Tour in 1992, the city had never seen anything like it. Over 70,000 fans filled the National Stadium waiting for a show that was being broadcast across the globe, and Jackson made them wait. Rising slowly from beneath the stage, he froze in his iconic stance, motionless, almost like a statue. For nearly 2 full minutes, he didn't move, didn't speak, didn't sing. The crowd, already in a frenzy, erupted into hysteria. Fans screamed themselves hoarse, some even bursting into tears, while others simply couldn't take the pressure and collapsed. Ambulances rushed through the aisles, lifting unconscious bodies out of the sea of people. What's incredible is that this all happened before a single lyric had been sung. Jackson's aura alone, his presence, created an atmosphere so overwhelming that human bodies gave out. And when he finally sprang to life, launching into his performance, the wave of fainting only escalated. It was a moment that proved Michael wasn't just performing. He was orchestrating raw human emotion on a scale never seen before. If Vienna was chaos, London was pure hysteria. When Michael Jackson played Wembley Stadium during the Bad Tour in 1988, over 72,000 people packed the venue, with thousands more outside unable to get tickets. This was no ordinary concert. It felt like the arrival of royalty. Even Prince Charles and Princess Diana were in attendance, yet it was Jackson who commanded the kind of reverence usually reserved for heads of state. The moment he leapt on stage, the sound of screaming was deafening. Entire sections of the audience were pulled into waves of emotion, and reports described dozens of fans fainting within the first 15 minutes. Security and medics couldn't keep up, carrying limp bodies over barriers while the music roared on. Cameras captured faces streaked with tears, people gasping for air, and others simply collapsing from the sheer overload of adrenaline and disbelief. What set Wembley apart was the scale. This wasn't just a few scattered fainting spells, it was mass hysteria on a legendary level. And for Jackson, it was validation. He wasn't just a performer anymore, he was a global phenomenon so overwhelming that fans literally couldn't stay conscious in his presence. By 1997, Michael Jackson was deep into his HISTY tour, and the spectacle had only grown bigger. But during one stop in Vienna, something happened that showed just how fragile the line was between idol and fan. In the middle of You Are Not Alone, Jackson invited a young woman from the audience onto the stage. At first, she was trembling, overwhelmed just to be standing next to him. As he sang, she clung to him with both arms, unable to let go. The cameras zoomed in, capturing her face twisted with tears, her body visibly shaking. And then, in front of tens of thousands, she fainted right in Jackson's arms. Security rushed forward, but Jackson didn't panic. He simply adjusted his stance, kept holding her, and continued singing as though nothing could interrupt the performance. It was equal parts shocking and surreal. The world's biggest pop star singing a love ballad while a fan lay unconscious against his chest. What makes this moment so iconic is how it blurred the line between concert and human drama. Was she overcome with emotion, or did she fake it to stay in his embrace longer? Fans have debated it for years, but one thing is certain: it became one of the most unforgettable fainting incidents in Michael's career. When Michael Jackson took the Dangerous Tour to Seoul, South Korea in 1997, the anticipation was unmatched. For many in the crowd, this was their first time ever seeing him live, and the sheer buildup was overwhelming. The Olympic Stadium was crammed with more than 70,000 fans, and the atmosphere was a mix of excitement, nervous tension, and hysteria. From the very first moments, the reaction was explosive. As soon as Jackson appeared, a wave of screams erupted so loud it drowned out the opening music. Fans surged forward in the crush, and people started fainting almost instantly. Medics struggled to keep up as security pulled unconscious fans over the barriers one after another. Some were revived with water, others carried out completely limp, yet the fainting didn't stop. It came in waves every time Jackson moved closer to the audience or even glanced toward the crowd. What made Seoul stand out wasn't just the number of faintings, but the desperation. Fans were crying, reaching out their arms, collapsing into tears and exhaustion. The cameras caught heartbreaking images of young girls being dragged away from the front rows, still sobbing even as they lost consciousness. For the audience, it wasn't just a concert, it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience that overwhelmed the body itself. Remember, if you enjoy Michael Jackson videos just like this one, subscribe to the channel. It would be greatly appreciated.
The Bucharest concert of 1992 has gone down in history not only as one of Michael Jackson's most legendary shows, but also as the clearest example of how his presence could physically overwhelm his audience. This wasn't just another concert, it was broadcast live on HBO, reaching tens of millions of viewers worldwide. And what those cameras captured was unforgettable. Throughout the performance, the broadcast kept cutting to the audience, and again, the images were the same. Fans in tears, gasping for breath, clinging to each other, and collapsing under the sheer emotional weight. Security guards carried unconscious fans out of the crowd by the dozens, some limp and unresponsive, others still crying even as they were dragged away. One girl was shown being wheeled out on a stretcher, her face still streaked with tears, while Jackson continued performing with absolute intensity on stage. What makes this moment stand out is that it wasn't just rumored, it was documented on live television. Millions of people around the world witnessed the hysteria in real time. It cemented the idea that fainting at a Michael Jackson concert wasn't exaggeration or fan lore, it was reality. The world watched as fans literally couldn't handle the experience of seeing him live, and the footage became one of the most powerful testaments to the magnitude of his fame. Munich 1997 remains one of the most talked about stops on the HI Story World Tour, not only because of the scale of the show, but because of the sheer emotional collapse of the audience. The performance of Earth Song in particular sent the crowd into a frenzy. With its apocalyptic staging, tanks, fire, smoke, and Jackson's raw cries for the planet, the song already carried a heavy weight. But in Munich, that weight became almost unbearable for fans. As Jackson threw himself into the performance, collapsing to his knees and wailing into the microphone, thousands in the audience mirrored his emotion. The camera panned across the front rows, capturing fans sobbing uncontrollably, clutching their chests, and screaming his name like it was their last breath. Dozens fainted right there, overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment. Security staff pulled unconscious bodies over barriers at a frantic pace, sometimes carrying 2 people at once. One infamous clip shows a young woman screaming hysterically before her eyes roll back and she slumps into the arms of another fan. Scenes like this repeated all night, people fainting, being revived, then fainting again when Jackson reappeared near their side of the stage. Earth Song wasn't just a performance that night, it was a tidal wave of raw energy, and for many in Munich, their bodies simply couldn't handle it. Copenhagen's stop on the HI Story Tour in 1997 showed just how far fans were willing to push their bodies just to witness Michael Jackson live. The concert took place under heavy rain, with the stadium drenched and the ground slick with mud, yet not a single fan moved from their spot. Thousands stood for hours in soaked clothes, screaming through the storm, waiting for Jackson to appear. When the lights cut out and his silhouette appeared, the reaction was volcanic. People surged forward despite the slippery ground, creating waves of panic near the front. Within minutes of the show starting, fans were collapsing left and right, some from exhaustion, others from the sheer emotional overload. Medics dragged limp bodies through puddles, while poncho-clad security struggled to carry people away from the crush. The most striking part of Copenhagen was how unrelenting the fainting was. Even as paramedics lined the stadium floor, even as rain poured down on unconscious fans being revived, the hysteria didn't stop. Every movement from Jackson, every glance, every lean, every dance move sent another wave of people over the edge. For those who were conscious, the sight of fans being wheeled out on stretchers only added to the intensity, making the night feel more like a fever dream than a concert. Seoul's Olympic Stadium was already boiling with tension hours before Michael Jackson ever stepped on stage. Fans had lined up overnight camping outside the venue, and by the time gates opened, the crush of bodies was so intense that people began fainting long before the first note of music. Security scrambled to manage the chaos, pulling exhausted fans out of line, while thousands more pushed forward, desperate for a front-row glimpse of their idol. When Jackson finally made his entrance, the eruption was instant. His dramatic rise from beneath the stage sent the stadium into shockwaves of hysteria. Entire sections screamed in unison, and dozens of fans went limp in the crowd. Medics carried bodies away on stretchers before the first song had even ended. The sheer scale of the fainting was unlike anything South Korea had seen before. What should have been a pop concert turned into something resembling a mass religious awakening. What stood out in Seoul was that many fans fainted not once, but multiple times. They were revived, brought back to their seats, only to collapse again when Jackson walked across the stage. The local press called it pop delirium, and it showed that his power wasn't confined to Western audiences. It was global, and no one was immune. Mexico City's Azteca Stadium is one of the largest venues in the world, and when Michael Jackson brought the Dangerous Tour there in 1993, it was filled to the brim with over 100,000 screaming fans. From the moment he appeared, the stadium was in chaos. The crowd pressed forward so violently that medics couldn't keep up with the fainting and collapses. Reports described waves of unconscious fans being pulled from the audience, while others sobbed uncontrollably, trembling in the heat and hysteria. Jackson didn't just sing and dance that night. He controlled the atmosphere like a conductor leading an orchestra of human emotion. Every pause, every stare, every lean toward the audience sent fresh waves of people over the edge. By the time the show ended, hundreds had fainted, and the stadium floor looked like the aftermath of a tidal wave. For Mexico City, it wasn't just a concert, it was a collective out-of-body experience. From Vienna to Seoul, Bucharest to Mexico City, Michael Jackson's concerts weren't just shows. They were events so overwhelming that fans literally lost consciousness. No other artist has commanded such raw devotion on a global scale. And if you thought fainting during his performances was extreme, wait until you see the flips, spins, and moves that pushed fans completely over the edge. Check out our previous video, 10 Michael Jackson dance moves that made fans faint, for even more unbelievable moments.